The last lens we looked at on this channel was this 500mm mirror lens, and with its more than adequate length and downright dangerous girth, it offers a very narrow, zoomed in, and closed-minded view of the world, much like your average incel. But what if you wanted to, say, expand your mind, like a crazy ayahuasca trip in the Inca Mountains? Well, then it might look something like this. This is the view from the Voigtlander 15mm f4.5 Super-Wide Heliar lens, and as you can see, it's pretty wide. But because it's so wide, I need to pull you closer, so give me a second. So this is the view from 15mm, and as you can see, it's pretty dang wide. So wide, in fact, that I'm only about 3 feet from the camera and you can see my entire body, compared to before when I was like 15 feet away and you could only see my head. Like I said, this is the view from the Voigtlander 15mm f4.5 Super-Wide Heliar. But what does super wide really mean? And I could tell you, but why would I do that when I could just show you with math? What do you think about math, Josie? She's excited. Alright, this is my third time attempting this, so whatever happens, happens. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my PowerPoint presentation titled Deriving a Lens's Angle of View, a Geometric Approach, V3, Final. Sponsored, of course, by my copious amounts of free time and the fact that I just really like math. A couple of considerations before we begin. Number one, this is only applicable to rectilinear lenses. If you don't know what that means, just hang on, we'll get there a little bit later in the video. Number two, this is only when focus is at infinity. Closer focus moves the lens elements around, which changes the angle of view. This is actually why focus breathing is a thing when you're shooting video. And we're going to be deriving the diagonal angle of view today because that's what manufacturers report, because it's the largest. And we all know that bigger number is better than smaller number. You can also, of course, report the horizontal or vertical angles of view, but the diagonal one is the one that's on the spec sheet. All right, so this is the setup. This is a wall with a pinhole in it. All rectilinear lenses can be modeled by a pinhole lens, and it keeps the math very simple. So in our wall with a pinhole, we have one side that's the environment and one side that's the camera. Light enters in from the environment into the camera to strike a sensor plane. The distance between the sensor plane and the pinhole is defined as the focal length of the lens. And the length of the sensor is going to be defined by L. And the quantity that we're interested in is this angle right here, theta, which is the angle of view. Now, assuming that this triangle of light inside the camera is aligned with the optical axis of the lens, this quantity theta is entirely defined by F and L. If you really would like to challenge yourself, take a second to look at this diagram and see if you can figure out how to relate L and F to theta. All right, now that all the nerds are gone, I'll walk you through how we do it. So this triangle right here is an isosceles triangle. And what that means is we can break it up into two right triangles. And right triangles give us access to all sorts of trigonometric functions. We just have to adjust our quantities a little bit. Focal length stays the same, but we change L to L over 2, and we change the angle that we're solving for, because we're splitting this angle in half, which is equal to theta, into theta over 2. And then we can break out this smaller right triangle and do our trig there. So because this right triangle has two side lengths and an angle, it's already fully defined. So we can set the tangent function of theta over 2 equal to L over 2 over F, which when solving for theta gives us 2 times the inverse tangent of L over 2F. Now L could really be any quantity of a lens. Because most camera sensors are square, L is going to be the corner to corner distance. But because we also know the width and the height of the sensor, and because this triangle is also a right triangle, we have access to everybody's favorite trigonometric function, Pythagorean's theorem, which says that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Or in our case, L squared equals width squared plus height squared. And then we can solve that for L, and then plug that back into our original equation to give us our final equation of the angle of view theta equals 2 times the inverse tangent of the square root of the sensor width squared plus the height squared, all over 2 times the focal length. And in tradition, we box our answer. Now, a 35mm full-frame sensor or piece of film is 24mm wide by 36mm high. And if we plug that into our trusty TI-84, it gives us an angle of view of 110 degrees, which is exactly equal to what's on the spec sheet. Imagine that. And because this function is continuous, we can plug in whatever focal length and sensor size we want. So I did that, which gives us this really beautiful graph of angle of view compared to focal length for all sorts of different formats. The focal length is on a log scale, so you have to be a little careful picking out your focal lengths, but it just made the most sense because the largest changes in angle of view occur at the smallest focal lengths. So if we pick our focal length here, about 15 millimeters, go up to the yellow line, that gives us about 110. Crazy how that works. But you can also use this chart to calculate equivalent focal lengths on whatever sensor size you have. So say I have an 8x10 camera and I wanted to match the 15 millimeter focal length. I can just follow 110 degrees all the way over to 8x10. That is about 120 degrees approximately. Anyways, graphs are really cool. So I decided to go overboard and create 3 of them. Feel free to take a screenshot and use these however you'd like. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk, and now back to the video. Wow, cool. See, you don't hate math, you just hate abstract math. Okay, now that we have an actual number, we can compare it to a real-life measurement. All right, so here's the setup. I tilted the camera so that this diagonal is approximately horizontal because that's the widest angle that the lens can view. I've got a couple of light stands here that I'm just gonna push towards the corners of the frame. Then I'm gonna mark them down on the ground and then draw some lines and measure it with a protractor. It really doesn't get any simpler than that. I read 98 degrees. It's not a perfect measurement, it's close enough. And would you look at that? It's exactly the same as what's on the product spec sheet. See, you didn't know this was an episode of Cyberchase. But why would somebody need that much field of view? I mean, why does anybody really need anything? But for me, I particularly like to use it for very large objects or spaces where I can't exactly back up as far as I want to. Like the large buildings or small indoor spaces found in New York City, baby!
All about the Mets, baby. Let's go Mets. Love the Mets. Hey, I'm walking here.
Katie and I were headed up to the Windy City with our friends Allie and Logan to celebrate Katie's birthday last February. There it is, the big tomato. And I figured this would be a super opportunity to showcase this super wide lens.
Super wide.
This lens has a native Leica M mount, so it pairs perfectly with my Bessa R2M. First things you're going to notice about shooting a lens this wide is that you immediately need an accessory to be able to use it effectively. And that accessory is the external viewfinder, which you can see here. This is the first party one directly from Voigtlander, and I can tell you it is not exactly cheap. It also sets up kind of a weird workflow where you have to look through the viewfinder on the Bessa to meter and focus, and then through the external viewfinder to frame up your shot. It takes a little getting used to. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of expensive, but it's really nice to be able to see exactly what you're shooting. And this particular external viewfinder is a beautiful optic to look through in its own right. Our first stop after settling into our hotel room was a quick ride on the subway downtown where we'd be getting dinner and drinks.
You don't mess with the postal police. They always get their man.
Shout out to this lamppost for letting me lean against it, even if it wasn't a perfect tripod. This is the American economy. Knowing that the main point of this outing was to do a lot of drinking in dark places, I decided to bring along my external flash, which makes things a little bit more complicated. Because the external viewfinder sits in the hot shoe, if you actually want to trigger your flash with the hot shoe, you gotta pull the viewfinder off and use the built-in viewfinder in the camera. It's much narrower than the external viewfinder, so you won't be able to tell exactly what you're getting in frame. In this case, it actually turns out to be okay, because the spread on this flash is about as wide as a 35mm lens, so using the built-in viewfinder will give you about the area that's going to be illuminated anyways. I love the wide variety of details you can get in a single shot with such a wide frame. This is the exact moment that Allie saw Katie having way too much fun. Okay, not the exact moment, but Katie was having a little too much fun, and I won't give you the details, but it involved some ruined shoes. While Katie sobers up, let's talk about the low amount of distortion that the Super-Wide Heliar produces and why that's kind of incredible. All photographic methods using a flat film plane will distort the image to some degree or another. This is because what a lens is trying to do is map the sector of the sphere that you can see in front of you onto a flat film plane. Distortion generally only becomes a big problem on super wide lenses like this because the sector of the sphere that you're trying to flatten out is much wider. As your focal length increases, the sector becomes smaller and smaller, and it starts to look more and more like a plane anyways, so the lens doesn't have to do as much work to flatten it out. This is why small areas of the world can be mapped with low distortion, but when you scale it up to an entire globe, you have to pick a map projection that offers trade-offs in one way or another. You simply can't accurately reproduce a globe on a flat surface. And that's why globes are a thing, because you can reproduce a sphere on a sphere perfectly. Oh, and fun fact, this is also why your eyes don't suffer from this type of distortion problem either. Because what you're seeing in front of you and your retinas are both sections of a sphere. Hello? Are you really stuck between the green and the blue screen? Hey, come on. Oh my god. Hey, come out. Thank you. Okay, where was I? When you're flattening out such a large sector of a sphere, you're gonna have some type of distortion, and lenses tend to do this in one of two ways. The two different methods result in curvilinear and rectilinear lenses. Curvilinear lenses are simpler and therefore cheaper to make, but the end result is a lens that does not keep straight lines straight, especially near the edges of the frame. This is commonly seen in ultra-wide fisheye lenses. Rectilinear lenses are relatively more difficult and costly to construct, but they do result in a lens that keeps straight lines straight across the frame at the expense of some size distortion near the edges. When you're shooting with this lens, you actually get to experience both types of distortion because while the lens itself is rectilinear, the external viewfinder is curvilinear. The first time I went shooting with this lens, I was expecting my pictures to have lots of pincushion distortion with curved lines near the edges of the frame, because that's what it looked like in the viewfinder. So I was pleasantly surprised when I got my scans back and all of the pictures had straight lines across the frame. And to prove it to you, here's my very retro and not totally sun-damaged parquet wood flooring to show you the different types of distortion through the lens and the viewfinder. There's an entire subsection of math that deals with this kind of thing. It's called topology, if you're interested. But that's enough math for today. I think Katie's probably feeling better. Our next day started out with the only legally allowed breakfast in New York City, bagels. We were going to a Broadway show in the evening, so we spent the whole day just kind of walking around and being tourists. And I got to practice real street photography on the streets of New York City for the first time. Because the 15mm is just so damn wide, I found it difficult to take pictures of skyscrapers with a good balance between the ground and the sky. But I really think I nailed it with this picture of 30 Rock, and it's definitely the best of the skyscraper series. One of the quirks of using this lens, as well as any super wide lens, is that it has crazy wide depth of field. Out in daylight shooting at f8, you can get everything from infinity to 2.5 feet away in focus at the same time. And honestly, I probably could have gone the whole weekend without ever having to focus once. And don't even get me started on f22, because if you go by the markings on the lens barrel, you can have everything from the dust on the lens to the far reaches of the Hubble Deep Field in focus at the same time. In the right scenarios, focusing is truly optional with this lens. That being said, I still managed to miss it at least once. Ah, the sounds of the city! I'm a big fan of the balance of this shot, but it would have been perfect had the cab been framed in the window a little bit better, and the addition of someone in the bus lane would have been a really nice touch. You might also notice that some of the interior shots are a little bit dark, and that's because of another major downfall of super wide lenses is that they tend to be pretty slow. I think it's a limitation of modern lens design and the optical properties of glass, but wide lenses just cannot be that fast. Unless you're willing to drop like 10 grand on a custom lens from Nikon. apparently just really difficult to have a lens with a wide aperture that collects light from so many different directions. So clearly there's a give and take with this lens, but I didn't do it any favors by only shooting 100 speed film. The show we saw was Sunset Boulevard, and it was probably the best Broadway show I've ever seen.
It's really dark in here.
I know, it's really dark.
It was definitely a very modern version of the show, but I really liked the inclusion of all the cameras and technology, and it also doesn't hurt that they do a cool dance number out in the street to start the second act. Following some really good ramen, it was time for us to head to the train station to board our Acela home. And several months later, when I got the film developed, and now much later reviewing them while putting this video together, I'm pretty happy with the results. I'm certainly not a natural-born street photographer, and I think even calling what I did in New York City street photography might anger some of the photography gods, but I can definitely see moments where this super-wide lens will shine in the future, particularly with space-limited indoor scenes, assuming I give it some higher-speed film, and also in instances where you just kind of have to be quick and you don't have time to focus. I'm really looking forward to using this lens more in the future, and I hope you enjoyed this super wide experience in New York City. Let me know down in the comments if you think 15mm is way too wide for any reasonable application. And while you're down there, you can also hit the like and subscribe button. Still trying to hit 1,000 before the end of the year. I'm kinda running out of time to make it happen, but if you could contribute, I'd appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, stay wide, my friends.